Hello. So this is our first science lesson that we're going to do today, and our new topic is materials and their properties. And this is an interesting one because you will have done this earlier on in different years, but we try and go into more detail about why materials may have been chosen for the jobs that they have been, and the specific scientific understanding behind why that's the case. So our aim for today is to identify different materials. And this is actually going back over stuff you've done before, but it's also one of those things that we just get to see what you already know and where we can push you, but also it's time for you to show us additional stuff that you might know. So let's have a think about this. These are things that you're going to need to think about during the lesson today. So the first one is that you know the name of different materials. In order for you to judge whether a material is good or not, you need to know the name of it, because you can't put properties to something you don't know. Secondly, you need to understand why different materials are used for different purposes. Quite often when you look at any different materials that are used in your house, there's a reason why they were chosen for that job. And that can actually be more complicated than you think, because it may be that they're not the best thing for the job, but they are cheaper or extortionately cheaper than using the best material. And they have to weigh that out. Is it better to make it out of something that they can get hold of easily, or is it better to make it out of the best material possible, but it being much more expensive? Thirdly, we need to label the materials that make an object. You need to think about what materials are in the objects, because what you'll find is quite a lot of objects are made out of several different materials. For example, if you look in your clothes and you look at the label in your clothes, what you'll see is that it's not just made out of one thing normally. Some are obviously, but quite often clothes are made out of a mixture of different things. And that's an interesting one to have a look at. Pause now and just have a look at a piece of clothing, have a look at the label inside it, and see what it might be. Often it is found on a label like this, and when you read it, it might say something along the lines of what it's made out of. So this particular top is 65% cotton and 35% polyester. And they're two different materials. Polyester is a type of plastic, actually, whereas cotton is a natural fiber. So they're using both of those two, and there's a reason why they've chosen to use both of those two. But by looking at it, you wouldn't necessarily know that's the materials that they're made from, which is why labeling materials is important. So what are materials themselves? So materials are things that look and feel, behave differently to each other. So different materials that you may have around the house quite often have that reason, or feel different, or do a different job, and that's why they're different materials. Some of them are very similar. So you can have lots of different types of metal, and they might be chosen for particular reasons as to why they've chosen that metal for that job. Take wiring, for example. The best wiring often is copper wiring, because it is highly conductive of electricity, and that's the reason why it is chosen, compared to some other metals which aren't as good. It's also cheap, which is a bonus. So what materials make this object on the screen now? Have a quick look and just think about it. Pause for a second now. Okay, hopefully that was relatively straightforward, because you will have seen something like this before, and actually having a look at it, you can see that what you know already. You can see at the bottom down here that these legs are shiny, and quite often we associate that with metals, and more than likely this is a metal. Now, we probably can't tell what type of metal that is at the moment by looking at it. We don't know how light it is, We don't know how strong it is. Those other bits are the bits that define it within metal. It could be steel, but it could quite easily be other types of metal that they've used for different reasons. And the top of this table, you can see here, has a grain across the top. And quite often you'll have seen this before. When you look at woods, you will see that grain of the growth of the wood. And quite often you see that. Now, often these types of tables, round the edge over here, in order to protect the side of the table, might have just a plastic coating around the outside edge. This is sometimes the case and sometimes not the case. We don't know looking at this picture without being able to hold it, but that could be the case here. And if that's the case, then actually this particular table would be made out of 3 different materials, and they would have been chosen for different reasons. And one of the reasons is that aesthetically, the way they look makes a difference as to why we might choose something. Somebody might like that high polished top with the grain of the wood and the rich texture that goes with it, and like those shiny legs. But why did they make their legs out of metal rather than wood? Was it cheaper? Was it lighter? Did it mean that it was easier to move the table? Is it easier to make, or is it stronger? And these are things they have to take into account when they think about what materials they're using for what job. So, different materials. What other material names do you know? Now, here's my task for you. What I want you to do is pause the video now, and I want you to think, without looking at anything, any names of any materials that you know. How many can you get? In tomorrow's live session, I'm going to ask you how many you can come up with, and we're going to list as many as we can and see whether or not we can come up with a good list, and whether or not some of the materials we say aren't really materials, or whether we can add more to other people's lists. Pause now and have a go. Okay, so hopefully you've got a list. Now, we're not going to go through the list, but more than likely the things that you might find on this list are things like woods, and maybe you can name different types of wood. So under wood, you might also have pine, oak, mahogany, teak, lots of different types of woods, and they're all used for different reasons. You might have metal, and again, under metal, you could have different types of metal. You might have steel, aluminium, copper, nickel, tin, and they might also be used for different reasons. And you might not know which metal is in some objects that you see around the house. Then you've got plastics. Again, there are different types of plastics. And if you have a look on some of the plastics that you have a look around, actually there's a code on the bottom of them, and that relates to what type of plastic it is and how easy it is to recycle. There are other things as well, things like glass is a material that is often used, different types of fabric, different types of pottery, clay, ceramics. There is more than you think. So what I want you to do, your main task for today, I want you to look around your house, and I'm going to let you take more than 10 minutes if you want to do this. And I want you to have a look, and you're going to look first off for any plastic things. And anything you see that is plastic, or you think might be plastic, you're going to write down under plastic. And that could also be part of something else. So if it is just a part of something, you could write down what it is in that object that you think is plastic. Then have a look for some glass. And you might only think that you've got windows as written down on here. But think more carefully. Where else might you see glass? Is it actually glass, or is it a type of plastic? Then you've got wood. Where around the house might you find wood? Are your chairs, are your table, are your doors, are the coping on your ceilings, is the skirting on your floor made out of wood, or are they made out of any other materials? And then metal. Where might you find metal around your house? And my challenge to you, and to see whether or not you can find something different, is have a look and see if you can find any other materials that isn't plastic, glass, wood, or metal. And if you can, what material is it and what objects can you find? I can think of a very easy one we've spoken about already, and I'm sure right now you are very, very close to that type of material. There's my hint to you. There might be others as well. There are some that you might think is one type of material that actually isn't. And that's an interesting thing and a thing that you need to think about. Have a look, see what you can find, write your list and bring it with you tomorrow. If you can, upload it to Tapestry so I can see what people have come up with and we can have a discussion around what people have said and what they found and what materials they think things might be of. Now, this is only the start of our science because identifying material is only step one. Remember, we still need to think about why that material may have been chosen for the job it has, and that can be quite a complicated thing. There are so many properties of materials and some properties that humans assign to materials which makes a difference as well. Have a think, see what you can do, and I look forward to seeing your work up on Tapestry and talking about it tomorrow. Goodbye.